So thanks for joining us today for our virtual community called Arachne Digital. This is an opportunity to learn, connect, and contribute to the open source cybersecurity ecosystem and meet part of the Arachne Digital team. This month, we're going to be focusing on our cyber threat intelligence tool, Thread. Let me make sure everyone's in. Cool. Awesome. So for this event, we have a couple sections we're going to cover. Right now, we're in the introductions and icebreaker section. Then we'll move into an overview of Thread, downloading Thread, and questions and answers. If you have any questions throughout the duration of the event, feel free to drop them in chat and we'll work to respond to them as we're able. This call, we're going to have Kade, the co-founder of Arachne Digital, sharing more about Thread's inception, use cases, and how to use the online application. And then we'll have a video recording from Jen, who's also on the call, our technical lead and co-founder, for how to download and use Thread from GitHub. All right, so first we're going to start with some introductions. So my name is Vic. I use they, them. I'm a community manager with Arachne Digital. Outside of cybersecurity and working with Arachne, I've had a long interest in open source communities, open data, and transparency in government. I'm also a big art enthusiast and like to engage in things like tarot readings, dream interpretations, and just digital art in general. And Kade, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, I'm Kade. So I'm one of the co-founders for Arachne Digital. I've worked in security for a couple of years now, across both sort of public and private sector. And now basically running Arachne Digital, so very much focusing on threat intelligence. I guess sort of outside of working on this kind of stuff, dig into you can't see I have a whole bunch of like bookcases and novels surrounding me. I'm very much into like writing and fiction. It's one of my big passions.
Awesome. And Jen, since you're here, it'd be great to hear a little bit about you. Next time, I didn't know you were going to be joining us, but yeah, I would have included you.
Oh, no, it's okay. Surprise guest. I'm going to be here for like half the call. So if there are any technical questions, please do feel free to still ask and I will get around to answering. But yes, I am the other half of Arachne Digital. I do the tech side of things. My background is computer science. I've been a software engineer in the public sector before, and now I get to work on all things cybersecurity intelligence with Arachne.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. And for folks that are here, we'd love to hear where you're from. If you want to share your current location, a time zone that you're in, or an emoji that you're vibing with in the chat. Something fun about the Arachne Digital team and our collaborators like Stephen, who's in chat as well, is that we are based all over the world. So Kade is in New Zealand. I am here in Texas. Jen is in London. Steven, I think you're in Boston, Massachusetts. So if y'all want to drop in the chat, maybe the current location, time, and an emoji you're vibing with, just so we can learn a little bit more about people who are here. I'm a big fan of the sparkle emoji, if you can't tell from this slide. Awesome. UK. Yeah, right now we're at 4 p.m. here in Texas, Central Standard Time. I think last time we had people like in France. Oh, Canada, awesome. And it's snowy. Definitely not snowing here in Texas. I'll tell you that. It is bright and sunny and the sky is clear and blue. Folks, a couple more minutes if y'all, or a couple more seconds if y'all want to share. If not, that's okay too. We can just keep moving on. Okay, well, if at any point you'd like to share in the chat, feel free and go for it. Awesome. Comment. Okay, so as we move forward with this presentation, oh, hey, Amaka, New York, awesome, thanks for joining. As we move forward with this presentation, if you'd like to share anything that you learned here, we are on 2 social platforms. So you can find us at Arachne Digital on LinkedIn. I'll drop the link here in chat. And we also recently created an account for Blue Sky if you're over there as well. So feel free to screenshot, add us, share any takeaways in these spaces, or simply follow along. We'll be sharing more about our events, articles we write, things of that nature on these social accounts. So what is Arachne Digital? We are a cybersecurity organization that works to advance global cybersecurity knowledge through consultation, our open source tool thread, which you're going to be hearing a lot about today, and access to a threat intelligence database. You can learn more about us by visiting our website, which I'm going to also drop in chat. All right, so for the rest of this time, we're going to be hearing from Kade, who's going to go over what Thread is, a little bit more about its inception, and give a use case example as well as a walkthrough. From there, we'll be hearing from Jen via video. There'll be a break time in between if you have any questions, and then plenty of time afterwards if you have additional questions or just want to chat about the work that we do or how to get involved in our open source community. All right, Kade, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Okay, so I guess a very quick apology up front. This field comes with a lot of acronyms, so we thought it might be good just to run through just some of the quick ones at the beginning, just to give people a bit of context. So you'll hear like Thread get mentioned a lot. So Thread is basically a tool that Arachne Digital is currently maintaining. We've forked it from a project called Tram that we're also going to talk about. So you may hear like threat intelligence or cyber threat intelligence, so CTI that gets thrown around. Basically, that is basically like collecting information on hackers and structuring it in a way that people can use it to protect themselves. Like you can sort of get into the weeds of sort of how that's all done, but that's sort of like at a high level what it is as a concept. Looking at MITRE ATT&CK. So MITRE is an organization based out of the US, and they do a lot of good work around like best practice. And ATT&CK is a framework that they produce. And so it basically looks at a number of what we call TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, which is our next acronym. So basically, ATT&CK is a framework. It has quite a number of columns. Each of those columns are what we call tactics. They are sort of overarching, sort of like different pieces of what we call a kill chain. It's a very sort of militaristic term, but just the idea as far as like the things that you are going to have to do as an attacker to complete whatever it is you are trying to do, whether it be like hack an organization, cause a particular effect, and that kind of stuff. You will have to do certain things. Those are techniques. Those are tactics. The techniques are basically the entries underneath those that basically sort of look at what is the actual thing that you are looking to do. And then the procedure is when you click into it, you will see sort of like an example and talking about sort of how it is done. That's the procedure. So collectively, we frame that up as TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And really what what ATT&CK is at the end of the day is there's a framework that just talks about all these different techniques, these different ways that people can be like going around doing hacking. And it just gives us a common language that we can all talk about. So when we're on the same page when we're talking about specific techniques. Like threat intelligence reports, so this is basically just a report that people can put together as far as the information that we want to be giving to people to help them make decisions. They may be someone in an organization that's looking at whether or not they want to look at how they want to allocate their security budgets, or it could be people that are working in a SOC, a security operations center, which is the next acronym, and they may want to be looking at a case, do we have the right detections in place? So that's sort of like what a report would be in that sense. So SOC, Security Operations Center, so this would be sort of like a team within an organization normally, and they will be responsible for protecting that organization from hacking. So they will normally have a bunch of tooling, and that will basically be doing a lot of analysis to figure out like are there anomalies that are occurring in the network and that kind of stuff, and they will then respond to that. And then threat informed defense. So this is a concept that has sort of like started to come out about in a little while. It's the idea, like there's a lot of things that go into threat informed defense, but the foundation of it basically is the idea of like rather than looking at sort of like real world best practice, as far as like just looking at like things that are occurring out in the real world. So that's we basically want to take like a evidence-based approach to how we want to do stuff. So rather than sort of like read like a textbook that can be like many years out of date, that can be talking about theories that may have been shown to really not be useful anymore, rather than taking that as what we are learning, looking at the real world and going, okay, what is actually occurring out there right now? What are the things that I can look at to tell me what should I be protecting myself against? How can I quantify that? That's really sort of the basis for threat-informed defense, looking at the real world rather than sort of just relying on theory and figuring out how do we protect ourselves. If you go to the next slide, please. Awesome. Okay. So some of the use cases for thread. So basically, if like thread maps free text to MITRE ATT&CK an order of magnitude faster than doing it by hand. As an example, sort of before I co-founded Arachne Digital, so I was wanting to do a presentation at a conference, and what I really wanted to do is I was like, cool. I haven't really seen a lot of talks that are talking about different ATPs. So advanced persistent threats, another acronym. ATPs are basically they are groups of hackers that are generally backed by a government. So I was like, I want to give this presentation and talk about ATPs and look at them in a long form study. So I picked ones. I picked APT29, which is a group that's attributed to the Russian SVR. And I said, I want to look at this group over the course of 10 years. And I want to see sort of like how have their techniques changed, how have they shifted, how have they adapted over time, and is there anything that we can learn from a lot of that? And I had heard of TRAM, and I was like, cool. I went online and just grabbed like 10 years worth of different reports in this group. And I said, I want to basically map all this so I can sort of like start doing my analysis. And I wanted to use TRAM, and TRAM just sort of didn't function out of the box. TRAM hadn't been maintained for some time at that point. So I had to do it by hand. And that presentation took me about 4 months to write. It would have taken me days had I been able to use a software tool to do it. So that's sort of like an example of like one of the use cases for Thread. If we take a step back and say, okay, so like mapping free text to MITRE ATT&CK, that's sweet, but why would you even want to do that? So some examples. As I said, like threat-informed defense is sort of like the key thing that we want to sort of like drive with what we're looking at for these TTPs. So tactics, techniques, and procedures. We want to be looking at the real world and figuring out what should we actually be defending ourselves against. A use case could be that, so you could be working in a SOC, a Security Operations Center. So for example, we have a client, they are what we call an MSP, so a managed security service provider. They are basically a SOC, and they offer themselves out to other organizations that can't sort of do their own security monitoring. They ingest our data. And so they may have a use case as far as like, cool, we have all these reports as far as these things we're responding to. We have all these incident reports, but they're written by a bunch of different people. And we're all talking about the same things. We talk about them in different ways. How can we sort of get some structure from this? And figure out what are the TTPs that we need to be looking at so that we can then go into the tools and make sure the tools are looking for the right things. So rather than sort of have someone go by hand and sort of like manually sort of like reconcile all that, you can put all those reports through Thread, and that is much faster. Conversely, you could be producing an intelligence report, let's say it's going to a decision maker, and you pulled in a whole bunch of different sources. Some of it could be like open source, some of it could be closed source stuff that you've done yourself. You synthesize all that, and you basically want to present this to someone to help them make a decision or also take some action on this. Now, all those sources can be talking about the same stuff in vastly different ways. And you want to reconcile all that such that the language you have in your report is basically conforming to a universal language as far as what attack is talking about. So that your report is something that someone can basically like check and go, okay, cool, like we know what it's referencing. This decision maker, they don't need to necessarily know the ins and outs of it, but they can go talk about this report to a counterpart in a like entirely different part of the world. And as long as they're talking the same TTPs, they can all go, okay, cool, we are talking the same language. We all know what everyone's talking about. We are on the same page. We can be interoperable with this information, as opposed to having sort of disparate language. Next slide. Awesome. Okay. So Thread. So this is sort of the software that we've been maintaining for a little bit. Basically, it is an open source cybersecurity initiative dedicated to enhancing cyber threat intelligence mapping. So basically, it basically takes the pretext and it maps it through to MITRE ATT&CK. And it's currently sort of sitting at app.arachne.digital/thread. So if we go to the next slide. Cool. Okay. So as far as the inception for Thread, so as I said, like I had heard about it some time back and I was like, cool, I want to get to grips with it, I want to use it, and it sort of just didn't work out of the box. So I approached Jenine and I was like, hey, I've got an idea for this organization. Like I want to actually stand up a company. I want to produce threat intelligence, and I really, really like this idea of TRAM. And we basically started to figure out, okay, so what needs to be improved? What are the things we want to add to additional functionality? What needs to be fixed? And we basically started to maintain TRAM. TRAM at this point had not been maintained for some time. So we started to do some work on it. We basically forked it and started that. TRAM was re-released, and the code base had basically diverged quite a lot from what we were doing. So we basically decided to just basically rename our fork as Thread and continue with that. Again, TRAM, it's had some iterations, and again, it is kind of languishing a little bit as far as like looking at the code base. I saw it was updated a couple of weeks back to change like a particular issue, but the substantial like actual additions to it sort of haven't been occurring for about 9 months or more. And that's relatively common of government initiatives, unfortunately. So we wanted to stand up an organization around our open source software, so that we are actively maintaining it. So that we have access to it. We aren't relying on something else that's falling out of date. It's something that we can maintain ourselves, basically. Next slide. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to give a bit of a run through as far as like how to use Thread. So I am going to share my screen. And we're going to pray to the demo gods that this is going to function. Okay. Hopefully that is coming through for everyone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Brilliant. Okay. So this is sort of where our website is currently sort of sitting at the moment. So we have app.arachne.digital, which is sort of like some of our older stuff, and it's sort of where Thread is sitting. We have a marketing site at arachne.digital. So if you want to, you can register here, and then you can basically log in once you have an account. You don't have to register to do that, to basically use Thread. It will make things a little bit easier if you want to. And so if we come here to Thread, this is just basically a version that we host and just put online for people to come along and use. So very quickly, so we basically have a couple of different queues here, which is where our reports are going to sit. We have some associated information around Thread itself. If you want to make your reports private, so only you can see it, you can click here and you can go through my reports. And like, let's say like you might have like absolutely no idea about MITRE ATT&CK, but you want to get started, and you're like sort of like, where do I even sort of get some information on this? We have a link here to a document that's been put up by CISA. So it will basically run through some best practice. So CISA is the cybersecurity infrastructure security agency. They do a lot of good work around a lot of this stuff. And they basically sort of put together this best practice in using MITRE ATT&CK. It's kind of the closest you're going to get as far as like training on how to use it. ATT&CK, as far as I'm aware, I don't think CISA put out anything else, and I'm not aware of many organizations that do. But that document's pretty comprehensive to sort of run through like what is ATT&CK, how to use it, that kind of stuff. So if I want to basically put a report through, so I'm going to basically use this report here. I'm going to say I want to basically analyze this report. So I can put in a URL here, and then I can basically give it a title. Now, if you have like lots of things you want to upload, you can use a CSV and you can upload a bunch of things. Otherwise, just putting in through a single page, you can just go URL title here. So I can make it private, as far as that will mean only you can see it. You'll need to be logged in, and you can go over here and you'll be able to see it. Otherwise, if not, we'll say, confirm I'm making this public so people can see it. So just be aware that you do need to make things private if you just want it to be just you looking at it. Otherwise, just because this is a web version and we have it stood up for everyone, things will be public unless you do make it private. And you'll have to click one of these to confirm what it is you're doing. So you shouldn't not know which one you've done because you've been forced to basically make a choice here. Now, the second bit is like, I consent to giving information in the submission freely to Arachne Digital. Now, the use cases I gave before, we're talking about like if you're in a SOC and you have like reports that are private to the company and you want to put them through Thread and that kind of stuff. If you want to do that, we would encourage you to download Thread and run it locally. That will mean that the information will stay with you. We will not be able to see it. If you put things through this web form, I want to be very, very clear. It will end up in the Arachne Digital database. So the web form is here as far as like, if you've got stuff in the public domain that you want to process, you can do that. But we do say like, please, it should be in the public domain. Do not put private things through here. We will be able to see it, and we do not want to encourage that at all. So you need to click this to say that you're confirming that this information is being given to us and you can see it. So just to be very, very clear around that. So I've clicked both of these. I'm going to click submit. And now this has come in over here. So basically this is sitting in our in queue. So what this is doing is this is now basically going out to that page. It's getting that text and it's running it through a bunch of different machine learning models to see if the text matches any TTPs. Now, I did some testing before this presentation. This report took about 30 seconds, maybe to a minute to process. Longer reports will take time because it has lots of different machine learning models that it will run through. But for the sake of time, like here is one that I put through earlier. So you'll basically see it will come into needs review. This one is basically, I've already done some work on it. So it's moved over to analyst reviewing. But when this is done, it will come in here to needs review. So here it has source. So you can just go to sort of the initial source as far as like where it's come from. So it will take you back to the original page. When it comes over here, you will see source and analysis. So we can click on analysis and it will bring you in here. So if you've used Tram before, some of this will be familiar and some of this will look a bit new. We've added in some features. So basically, top to bottom, I'll just run through this. It's pulled in the title of the report we gave it. And now when we're finished, we've got these buttons to export to PDF and then export to JSON. So the report, if you just want to give the report to someone, you have the option for PDF. If you want to start manipulating the data and you want to start passing it into different security tools, if they support JSON, we have that as well. Okay, now we have what we sort of term as metadata, which is information that we add in about the report. So article publication date, this will automatically populate most of the time. Sometimes it will not come through correctly, and sometimes you'll need to add it in yourself. It is basically a best guess based on what the software was able to sort of pull back to figure out a date for when this information was published. Start date and end date. So this is stuff you will have to fill in. And so the idea here is we want to look at, so what is the first time these techniques were seen and what is the last time? So time is something that I'm very, very passionate about as far as adding it into threat intelligence. If you ever worked in a security operations center in a SOC and you've ever responded to a TI alert, like a threat intelligence alert, and it just says, oh, there's a hit for this website or this file hash and that kind of stuff, and there's no date, you have no idea if that is fresh information, if it's many years potentially out of date, you've got no idea. So we make sure that we add in this time frame so that people can see, oh, okay, like I can see it was active between these dates. I can now make an informed decision around like how important this is. So dates are very, very crucial. If you don't have dates, I suppose they might just be like, the article is published on a set date and we don't know anything past that. You can click here and go no time range. And you can just basically put in sort of like the publication date to say at least like at this point in time, this is what was known. So we have a date range. So we will have our date range in here. Cool. And then you can go update there and it will basically put those dates in for you. Now, aggressors and victims. So again, this is sort of information we add in to give us some more context. So this particular report is talking about what we call a CTA, a cyber threat actor. It's basically a group of people that are hacking. So we talk about this group and it's listed as Kade Blizzard. So you've got a bunch of different groups you can select in here. We've added in Kade Blizzard. And we know that Kade Blizzard, based on the information in this report, is attributed to the Russian Federation. So we've added them in here as the aggressor. Now for victims, so the report is talking about Kade Blizzard hacking different government agencies, and there's one organization that was sort of providing transport infrastructure. So we've got government here because there's multiple government agencies listed. One of them specifically is called out as emergency services, and so we happen to have that. So I've just gone government as a broad example, and then government emergency services because we have that specific one listed, and then transport as well. And then the geography the system is being impacted is Ukraine. So we've put in Ukraine here. If the report is saying that this group is just hacking like NATO governments, for example, and you're like, hey, do I have to list like every single country in NATO? We've got some options here so that you can sort of pick as far as like if the report's just talking about a very broad geography or a particular block as far as like NATO or something like that, you can add that in there. Okay, so we now have our text that is coming from our report, and there will be images that will come in as well. And so for anything, there might be some text you don't want, and there's an image here we don't really like. So we can basically highlight that and we can go remove selected. And so that's going to remove anything that you've highlighted just to sort of streamline your report as you're working through it. So we've now got these sentences and you'll see some of them are highlighted. So each one that's highlighted is basically the software is saying that it thinks it's found a TTP and it will list it here. Now, there will be a bunch of different, like, say, sentences and flags here. I've already processed this one pretty much to completion. So that's why there's only one listed here. But for each of these sentences, there is at least one TTP. So there'll be a bunch of these when you sort of come into a fresh report. What you can do is you can click on it and it will take you to that sentence so that when you're sometimes if you're navigating quite a large report and you're sort of wading through multiple TTPs, it's easy to sort of click on it and just go straight to it. It's a nice time save for you. And so, like, for the sentence says, so this particular group, Kade Blizzard, they destroy systems, leak sensitive data, sell it on the dark web, and then post messages to ensure the victims are aware of it. That's a very broad statement, but that statement as far as, like, leak sensitive data, that does actually conform to a TTP as far as data from local system. So leak sensitive data, so that data came from somewhere, so it came from an organization that's stolen it from. So that was data from a local system that was taken. So that's one that actually come through correctly. And what I can do is I can accept it or I can reject it if I don't like it, or I could ignore it. So here, as far as like when you're using the web form, information that's accepted or rejected feeds back into our machine learning models to basically increase the accuracy of these models. So if I say accept, that is basically going to feed back into the model and say that that was a correct sentence. You should keep flagging those kinds of sentences as this particular TTP. Alternatively, if you reject it, you are then telling the software, actually, that sentence was not that TTP. Do not flag those kinds of sentences. And it will add that in as a part of the data to show that this is an example of it is not one of those TTPs. And so over time, with more and more data, it takes a lot of data, but with more and more data, the models get more and more accurate. Now, we've got an added an ignore button as well. So the idea here is you may not be aware if a specific TTP matches the sentence. if you click here, and if you see that these are all hyperlinks, so each of the TTPs will basically take you to attack itself. So if you don't know what the TTP is, you can read about it, and you can come here and sort of figure out what it is. Some of these can be like quite technical, and you could go, look, I don't quite know if this TTP actually reflects what this sentence is saying. I want to get this report out. Like, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here that's useful, and I don't want to have any incorrect information, but I'm just not quite sure on this one. So you can just basically ignore it. And what that will do is it will just drop it completely from this, so the models will not take that in as either an accept or reject. So that way the models will not be poisoned. The information put through here, as I said, like, it will come into the Arachne Digital database because this is the online version of it. There is a human in the back end that will be checking all this stuff that's coming in to make sure that the models aren't poisoned just like inadvertently or someone maliciously trying to do something. So there is a stopgap against that. But if you don't want it in your report when you're finished, you can just go ignore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept this. I think this TTP does match this particular sentence. So not awaiting review, this is all done. So for example, so like these are done. So for this particular sentence, so I've gone through and I feel this sentence does match these TTPs. So it's saying that the malware sent a GET request in a URL. So that is application layer protocol web protocols. It matches that TTP. And it's saying that it is downloading something. So that is ingress tool transfer. It's downloading tools and that kind of stuff. So I've gone and accepted those. As you can see, we've got some further date codes here. So we have like start date and end date. We have sort of the overarching dates as far as like the report itself. But if you wanted to get like really granular and you wanted to go technique by technique, for whatever reason, you may have that information available to you. And you may want to say, cool, I can say this technique started at this time and ended at this time. And I want to basically get to that level of detail. You can do that for every single TTP if you would like. Otherwise, you can leave it blank and it will pull through the information that was populated at the top of the report here. So you've gone through, you've accepted all of these. We're happy with the techniques we've found. We don't have any in this report, but as an example, there can be reports that will talk about indicators of compromise. So there can be things like IP addresses, file hashes, that kind of stuff. And it's basically things that a security tool can basically use to do searches and do a lookup and figure out, like, has this been seen on your network? And so that information can be quite useful. So what you do is you can highlight a sentence if you think there's a PTP, if you think there's a IOC, an indicator of compromise, that you think is useful, and you can go suggest and save. It will pull through the entire text of that sentence. We have stuff sort of in our backlog around refining this. At the moment, it will pull through the entire sentence. You may not want all the text there. You may just want like a particular IP address or something like that. This is a free text field, so you can basically modify this free text field, and you can go update IOC, and then it will pull through with just what you have left in there. So it'll just be like the IOC by itself, so that you can just feed that into your security tool, and it'll be able to do some mapping on that. We do have some smarts built in as far as quite often you will see IOCs that are what we call defanged. So if there is a website and it could still be malicious, like let's say it's posting up malware or something like that, what people will sometimes do is in parts of the URL, they will break it up by putting brackets around certain bits so that it breaks the URL up and it will not be recognized as a valid URL if you accidentally click on it or something like that. Now, because the security tooling that you're going to put this information into needs it unbroken up, we have some smarts in here that will basically refang it. So just be careful with working around that. But we have to do that for security tools. It will come through and it will refang a lot of stuff. Some stuff it doesn't quite get. Again, we have improvements that we're looking at down the track. But it does a pretty good job of it at the moment. That's sort of like end to end, all the stuff you will see down here. And now we've basically completed all this. What we'll do is we can go finish analysis. So I'm not going to do it just here because there is stuff that I think is still useful in this report. But for the sake of an example, you'll go finish analysis. It will then take you to a finalized page, and it will basically say, cool, so this information is now finalized, and you'll be able to export your PDF or your JSON if you would like. Now, if I click on this, and then we'll come up here, Now, is that still coming through as a download? Can people see that?
Yeah.
I can't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Brilliant. So basically, it comes up with this like draft watermark. So this is not done. That watermark will be removed if you finalize this report. So basically, it comes through and has the information you've just gone and processed. Has our sentence. Oh, sorry, it has our title up here. It has the URL it's come from, just so that everything is attributed. Everything can be double checked. We want to be super transparent with like where information has come from. Nothing is supposed to be like black box with any of the stuff that we are doing as far as the web version. We want everything to be like referenceable, and you can check it if need be. We have our technique start and end date that's come through. We have information as far as like our aggressor, victims, this information, and then we have basically our TTPs. So these are the TTPs that are found. We have the ID number and we have the name. So this is basically sort of how you identify what the TTP is. It will show you the sentence that it found it in, just so you can sort of reference and go, cool, I feel that is correct. And it will again have a start date and end date. Now, the cool thing, it doesn't show in these reports, but the really interesting thing with MITRE, so let's say if I just click on one of these, let's pick this one. And so exploit publicly facing application. So the really cool thing is, if I come in here, so this is an attack. It tells us what it is. It gives us some examples, just sort of contextualize it for you. The really cool thing from a defender's point of view is you have these mitigations and detections. So basically, you now know that TTP is relevant to you. So the idea is like you've been processing this and you're like, cool, this is like my industry and my geography falls within this range. I know this is important to me. I know that it's recent, so I know it's something I want to be caring about. What do I do about it now? So how do I mitigate it? Or if I can't mitigate it, how do I detect it? So this is like actionable advice put out by MITRE that talks about what you can do to prevent this TTP. From a defender's point of view, this is really, really cool. Like this is like one of the key things that like attack is good for, and it's underutilized for it. Like it's something that we really want to highlight as far as like one of the great use cases of attack. That is pretty much everything as far as like how to sort of run through thread. Do we have any questions? If not, Vic, we can go to the next part of the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Kade. Yeah, so if there are any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. We got the question about joining our Slack. There's a form that I linked into the chat. Just fill that out and you should get an invitation, especially by the end of today if you fill it out today. Okay, so up next, we're going to watch a video that Jen put together for us that shows how to actually download Thread from GitHub and use it on your computer. It's going to be about 11 minutes long, and Jen did have to leave. It's pretty late her time right now, but she's available in our Slack to answer any questions, and also on GitHub as well. So let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, I have a question before we continue, please.
Oh, yes, please go for it.
Okay, I wanted to ask on the mythical attack. So, is there on the file that was just shown to us, is there a link or an environment where we can go and then process these things and then know about it and learn how it works so that we can be able to apply it on our day-to-day lives when we're dealing with attacks in open source? Because why I'm asking this is I am a student of cybersecurity. I'm in my third semester, so I am open to learning this. I want to work with SOC team in my internship and probably to start off my cybersecurity career with SOC. So is there like an environment where we can go and practice or learn these things or do it on our own?
So I guess the best way to answer that is, I don't know if there's like dedicated environments, but like we have stood up like that version of Thread that I've just shown you as far as like something that people can use. It's online. You don't need to download it, that kind of stuff. But the caveat with that is like things that are put through it will be public to Arachne Digital, so just be aware of that. But it is like they're freely available. Like you can put whatever you like through it as long as it's in the public domain. So you could use it if you wanted to just find like blog posts and write-ups that have been put out by different organizations. You can put those through that web form that I've just sort of run through. And you can do exactly what I've just done as far as like look at the TTPs, pivot over to attack, figure out does this actually represent it, accept and reject it. It's basically like they're free for people to use in that sense. What we're going to go through here is something that if you wanted to use this on private information and you don't want that to be public in any way, shape or form, that is what we're going to go through now. It will take a little bit as far as like you'll need to basically like run it locally, which will entail what we're going to talk about as far as like installing it, getting it to run. So you could build your own environment. It's not terribly difficult, but it's also not the easiest thing in the world if you are haven't been in this space for a little bit. But this tutorial, like if you follow this video, we're going to run step by step. You should be able to reproduce it. You should be able to get it running in your like in an environment for yourself. So you could build an environment if you wanted to actually like put through private other info. Otherwise, that web form is probably the best one that you're going to have. I hope that sort of answers a little bit.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. I'm going to go ahead and start the video now.
Hello, my name is Jenine. I also go by Jen, and I'm on the tech side of things here at Arachne Digital. I'm here to talk to you about Thread, Arachne's tool to map reports and articles to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Thread was originally forked from the MITRE ATT&CK Tram project. Thank you so much for your interest in Thread. We're excited to have you on board. I'll be going through how to set Thread up in your local environment. For any open source veterans where this isn't your first time setting up a project, please note I'll be going through our setup steps a bit slowly and expanding on any steps and concepts you may already be familiar with. Let's get started. With open source projects, we use something called version control, and the program I'll be using is Git. So you want to make sure that Git is installed. Usually with any program, I like running just the name or a version check just to see, is it installed? Even if I get the version check wrong, I can tell it's installed by it telling me this is how you use the program. So with projects, I'll be demoing this in my Ubuntu environment, but whichever environment you're using, just create a new folder so you have a separate space to work in. So I have created a directory, Thread Demo. And GitHub helpfully has a bright green button to tell me this is where to get the code. So I'm going to copy that link and I'm going to git clone it. And what it's doing here is it's creating a folder called Thread and it's cloning the code base into that folder. When working with code bases, I would recommend the use of an IDE. IDEs, how I describe it, is how Microsoft Word is to text. You have all those options to format text. Working with text is much nicer in Microsoft Word than in Notepad. So IDEs are that to code. You just have a lot of formatting options and it's much prettier there and it's much more helpful. So for this demo, I'll be using PyCharm. But if you don't want to commit to an IDE right now, you can follow some of these steps. You'll just be using the command line a lot more. So in my IDE, I'm going to pick the root of that project that I just created, so Thread. With Python projects, you will probably see the recommendation about virtual environments, and I'm going to set one up right now. So on the command line, you'll be looking up the Python module venv, where you can create on the command line a virtual environment. But as I'm in the IDE, I'm going to make use of the GUI and create a virtual environment based on my 3.12 global environment right here. It wants an empty folder. Let's give it an empty folder. I'm going to create a virtual environment folder here and set that up. On the command line, in my IDE, I'm going to be in the terminal here. Just cd into the root of your project. In the root of the project, we have the requirements txt file. I'm then going to install all the requirements listed there. Now, we do have in our documentation an extra optional step before this step to tell you to have a consideration on your database preferences. For a quicker, simpler setup, feel free to just proceed. But if you know that you want to set this up with PostgreSQL, you've just got some additional requirements to look into before you uncomment this line and proceed with the requirement install. So I'm going to do that now. And that will take some time to just fetch. I've done it before, so it's using a cached version, and go ahead and install it. So that command finished installing all the packages, and we are next going to look at submodules. Again, in our documentation, we have a link for more information on submodules and some extra commands that will help you out. But submodules, basically, it's another repository within a repository that we have a dependency on. We have something called Spindle, which is the hard work from my colleague Kade, where this is a dictionary of cyber threat actors and a good resource to have all those threat actors organized. So we're very happy to have Thread being able to utilize Spindle such that you can map reports to threat actors in Spindle as well. But I can't use it yet. The folder is empty. So to do that, this is where we're going to use some git submodule commands. So for a first time setup, you want to initialize. If Thread ends up having multiple submodules as you are watching this, that init command will cover the initialization of other submodules, but for now it's just the one. This command you'll be using periodically just to fetch updates when Spindle and other submodules have any updates. So it cloned Spindle. So now I have a full in-force Spindle submodule ready to use. I am told of a commit that has been checked out, so 3.204.232. If I go to Spindle's page, the latest commit, 3.204.232 on the main branch, so I'm satisfied that that is the latest commit. Now I'm going to run the program. So on your command line, if you're not using an IDE, that will be python main.py. We have that in the documentation. But if you're using an IDE, I can play the current file. On an initial run, the database will take time just to set up and get all the attack data you need for mappings. I think it's around 1,300 mappings. So get some cat videos ready, get a cup of tea. You're going to want this running in the background. But if that doesn't sound so appealing to you, you can do this in stages. You can have it running and then stop the program. You'll see that a database file or your PostgreSQL database will be filled up with some entries. There'll be a database file if it's SQLite, and you can stop the program, decide to run it later, and it will continue just filling up the attacks where it left off initially. So don't feel like you have to commit to running this fully the first time. In true art attack fashion, I'm going to make a database file appear so I can get this started without waiting about. And it appears. My IDE has it in a slightly different color because that just means it is a git ignored file and it wasn't shipped with the original repo. So I'm going to play the main.py file. Your IDE, another use case for an IDE is debugging. So you'll be able to set breakpoints. And then I find that's a nice way to learn about how a code base works. So on the main file, I could start breakpoints, press that option and kind of learn, okay, how does this code base work? So if you're new to coding, that debugging and how your IDE helps you with that is a good thing to read. And huzzah! Localhost at port 9999. My database already had a report at the ready. And I've got sentences I can click about and map things to. And feel free to look at our docs to inform you on all the other things you can do with Thread. You've set Thread up. And thank you so much for your interest and for getting involved with us. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so that was Jen's demonstration. And sorry if you hear my cat in the background, it is close to feeding time. I see we do have a question in the chat. Kate, I don't know if you'd like to answer that really quickly. From Stephen.
Have you tried to extract cyber observables such as domains, IP addresses automatically? So we haven't yet, but we do have it in our very sort of long backlog of things, of features that we want to implement. So we've basically sort of done a quick sort of just get it in there for the moment as far as I can select it and so I can add it into the reports. But there is 100% automation that we can build around that, and it is coming. So it is stuff that we do want to be looking at in the future. So yes.
Great. Thanks.
Hello.
Awesome. And then if y'all would like to explore or follow along with what Jen shared in her video, you can find our repository on GitHub. I just dropped the link in the chat as well. So less than 20 minutes here. We have just a few more minutes for questions, but I do want to share that, thank you for coming. There are various ways that you can join and keep in touch with us if you have any more questions or ideas. I think you say your name's Serhi. I see that you left a comment in the chat as well. But yeah, if you want to keep up the discussion, we are in Slack. All you have to do is fill out our form, and then you should get an invitation from me to join in our channels. And then again, we are on GitHub. This recording will be posted on YouTube. We have a video posted from our last recording as well on YouTube, so we'd love for you to give us a follow. We'll continue to share our resources and recordings on all of our platforms. So any final questions in these last 2 minutes before closing?
Very useful. Thank you.
Yeah, very useful presentation and interesting in regards of this threat hunting, threat intelligence, insights, and report building as well. And for this threat application, need to try before come up with some questions for sure, but video is quite straightforward, especially with all this simple Python syntax. It's quite useful for community. Thanks.
And yeah, thank you for joining us. Great. And yeah, everybody who signed up, I'll be sending up the follow-up email once we have the recording posted. Likely it will be by my Monday, which I don't know what day y'all are at, where you're at. Kate is in Saturday already while I'm in Friday. But yeah, you will be getting an email. And yes, my cat is saying it is time to go. So thanks again for coming, and I hope to see y'all in the Slack channel. And I hope everyone has a great day or night, wherever you're at.
Thanks, Vic.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Kate.
Awesome. Bye.
Thanks,
All right. Take care, everybody.
Yes, take care.